Really, gender was taking over my life. We don't know what to do with them. When somebody came in with gender, we finally had a solution, and it was very satisfying. And now you're telling us we don't. And I'm like, yeah, you don't. One aspect that is very likely to actually bring them out of their gender dysphoria, the one thing that's likely, sexual feelings to other people and a consciousness of there is another world beyond me. You come out of the dressing room and you'd have a dress on and you'd have a boner. You're effectively taking part in a sex act when you're in the company of an autogynephile. You need to know what a paraphilia is if you're a woman, if you're going to equip yourself against it. Just focusing on one aspect of the gender issue, which is men who are autogynephiles and who are also monsters, is missing the tragedies of the families who've been ripped apart. Take issue with other people who are trolls, who are misrepresenting me and lying about me, and certainly whenever she does, I take issue with her. I don't actually believe in J.K. Rowling's Where Whatever You. We didn't actually believe in any of that. And it's got really strange position to be in, to be a cis white straight male. You're in a strange role. Have many trans men boyfriends?
No. They're all with men.
I'm being sarcastic. They're ending up as with each other. The two trans men an awful lot of the time because they're not getting anywhere with the biological male.
Hello, Stella. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super honored to have you on. I've been a big fan for about the past year. So I've been really looking forward to this. How are you doing?
I'm delighted to be on. I'm delighted that, young gay men are getting interested in this subject. We've been waiting for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, for me, all I had to do was be exposed to it, really. It's hard for me to avoid any hard facts, and I could see the facts staring me blue in the face. When you're entrenched in the community, it's actually possible to not even come across these arguments, which is crazy. So I'm sure a lot of my audience know who you are, but if we could do a quick introduction. You've had such an illustrious career and you do so much, so I don't know how you pack it all in, but...
Well, I'm a psychotherapist, and when I was a kid, I had what would now be called gender dysphoria. I had many, many, many years, and it was horrible. And it was fine when I was a very young kid. I kind of believed in magical thinking, and well, I didn't know I did, but that's what I was engaging in. And I thought my force of will and my strength of personality would get me everywhere. And then I hit puberty and I realised that nature was bigger than me. And I had a reckoning, an extraordinary reckoning at a young age of nature is bigger than me and you can force your will all you want. So that was disturbing, devastating at the time. I'd imagine actually very, very formative. And on I went. I ultimately became comfortable in my own skin, ultimately went on to, fall in love and, have the healing power of love because I was a very distressed kid. So that was a huge part of my formation as a woman.
Yeah.
When I fell in love and kind of the extraordinary waterfall of acceptance that can happen when you do fall in love and the person you love falls in love with you. So that was beautiful. And then I went on later in my 30s to become a psychotherapist, then became a writer and, wrote some books around parenting and mental health, and then revisited my experience of gender because gender was very big in the late teens, 2020. So 2017, I wrote an article for the Sunday Indo in Ireland, and then I was asked to do a film called Trans Kids, It's Time to Talk.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And that was about my whole experiences. And then went on, I was inundated with contact from then on, tried to go back to being a general psychotherapist for about 2 years. I released a book on anxiety in that time in 2019 called Fragile, and really gender was taking over my life because of emails, just so much contact.
Yeah.
And so I formed Gender Dysphoria Support Network in 2020 to help parents who've been impacted. And from that, I formed Genspect in 2021. That has kind of been a victim of its own success. It's been an extraordinary roller coaster since 2021. We formed it and, we were going to be a voice for parents at the time. And I became friends with a guy called Alistair Gunn around about that time, also a gay man who'd kind of gone through your experience of what's going down here in the gay world.
Yeah.
He helped us with the website at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think people thought we were this huge conglomerate, and it was really me and Alistair and another parent. And that,
right.
With lots of other people helping, but really the core of it was really us three. Then Alistair got very sick, so he's left, and it's myself and a parent, and we've got a great team. But I think people, some people are saying, who's funding Genspect? I'm like, funding Genspect, Jesus. Donate, please.
Yeah.
I mean, you get donations, and some people are very generous. But Jesus, it's been a labour of love, and it's totally taken over our lives, and it wasn't really meant to be that big, and it's become very, very big. So now we've got Genspect USA, Genspect Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty exhausted 3 years in now.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. I have my eyes on that conference in Lisbon. I don't know how easy it will be to get tickets, but
They've got to get released, I think, next week. So
okay,
you know,
better be on it. I have sort of seen background of your experience with gender dysphoria. How unique do you think that experience was? Because I guess back then you didn't have a wider influence and a political movement or social media, so it was sort of a spontaneous thing for yourself, and also unusual, if you don't mind me saying, for someone to then be heterosexual, right? So
yeah, it's a good question, actually. Spontaneous, I like that word. In that regard, I was unusual. Like, I lived in Blanchardstown, which was a big town in Dublin, and I was certainly the only kid like me. Now, there was I kind of looked down on them. I saw them as pseudo kind of tomboys because they were too girly for my eyes.
they weren't true trans.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, you know. I really did. And I had utter disdain for them. There's a few of them, but there was nobody the equivalent of me. I was generally accepted to being a very extreme case. But it wasn't a world where anybody was being sent to psychiatrists and getting diagnosed. It was, you know, I was born in 1974. It just wasn't in the culture at all. And so it was unusual. I now know it is unusual that there's always been a small section of girls and boys who have been as extreme as me. And I've seen enough accounts and read enough to know they were as extreme as me. I wasn't the most extreme. I thought I was, but it was. There is all sorts of very extreme in different places who spontaneously, usually around the age of 3 or 4, I was 3. As far as I know, I was 3. Nobody was noticing it at the time, but I'd imagine my memory goes back to about 3. 80%, but I noticed in the cast review it was kind of 89%, but about 80% usually go on to be gay or lesbian or bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
So I was unusual. I have to say, if it's a boy, it's more likely the boy will go on to become gay.
Yeah.
With girls, I think girls' sexuality, I think it's very different. I actually think it's a very male system, the gay, bisexual, heterosexual thing. I don't think it fits girls the way it would fit boys. I should say men and women.
I think that makes sense, because I've met a few girls who only dated men and still are attracted to men, and then they just happen to meet a woman and fall in love with her. Which
I don't
for men,
yeah,
you know,
men know they fancy the men. And they might be with a woman, but they know. Well, with women, they're like, no. And then I met her. And there's all sorts of different things that happen. And evolution kind of seems to come into play, because women hit their menopause and then they become lesbian. It's like, I don't need babies anymore. See us. I wouldn't like to be us.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Men's sexuality seems to be fixed from a young age, and it's
target oriented.
Yeah, and it makes sense from an evolutionary point of view that they just need to get the job done, sort of, and find their mate, I suppose. But for women, I guess you naturally have a real need for companionship. I know that both do. I mean, I certainly value companionship.
I just don't think the categories suit as well. They do some people. Some women are just heterosexual. Some women are bisexual, and some women are lesbian. But there's a huge number who are more complicated than that, and it doesn't really seem to fit very well as a framework.
Yeah, and it would make sense why most end up with men anyway, because then, you know, that's how they raise a family and bear children and everything. So with your gender dysphoria as a teenager, was it a slow burn in terms of coming out of it? Was there any day you woke up and thought, oh gosh, I don't feel that way anymore? What was that like?
That's interesting. So it was at its strongest as a child. Then I tried to get out of it, and I'd made a self-made prison. That's why I'm very interested in the psychology of desistance, because I found it very hard to desist and retain my dignity. I was mortified that I'd basically gone in so deep into something, and how the hell was I to pull back? I didn't know how to pull back with dignity. And I therefore stayed in for much longer because I was paralysed and didn't know what to do. So by the time I was a teenager, it wasn't that I was happy to be a girl. I was the ultimate misogynist. I just thought everything girlish was just embarrassing, cringy, awful. Even the shape of girls, I remember.
Wow.
You know,
yeah,
like they're big horses. It's awful. Like, that's how I was thinking.
It's probably similar to my experience as a teenager. Thinking, how am I supposed to be not in a misogynist way, just in a confusion.
That's so funny because I had to say just, two things were happening. One, I was a total misogynist. I don't know why, but I was. I have my personal opinions, but it's all hindsight. But at the same time, in early puberty, I started falling intensely in love, like these intense crushes with boys, like head over heels, stalky. As intense as I was gender dysphoric, I became intensely crush bound, like these extraordinary, stalky kind of responses to random boys. God bless them. Little did they know the cycle of the town had them. I had them in my eyesight, but like I realised I was on a heightened to nothing because I looked like a boy and I was known to be that freaky girl boy around the town whose constant question was, are you a girl or a boy? And I noticed Helena, who's a well-known detransitioner, she had the very same. She had these intense. So I think there was something like a sexual awakening. I think there was a sex related to the whole thing. The fact that it was so intense, just like my gender dysphoria or whatever you would call it, I don't know, it feels very connected. So by the time I was a teenager, I was just a very unhappy, lost, bewildered kid. I wasn't thinking, it's gone. I just rolling from I hate myself to I hate my body.
Yeah.
Really going any further than that. Like when you're a teenager, I think we forget just how animalistic it is. I want, I hate. You know what I mean? I think it's very animalistic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I look back on mine, I'm amazed at how little introspective I was in terms of when you're a kid, you seem to be a lot more focused externally, although that trend seems to be changing for the worse, maybe. And I had a difficult childhood too, but I think I was more focused on the outside world, which was, quite a good protective mechanism, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I think puberty brings us out from when you're a kid. You're like, I want the cake, I want the toys, I want those friends, I want this game. You know what I mean? You're just me.
Yeah.
And then when you go to puberty, you have a sexual awakening and you therefore need more social skills so that you can be loved, if you follow me. So a lot is happening cognitively and emotionally. And it happened to me. It's like, well, who's going to fancy me while I'm walking around like a bloke? I wasn't consciously thinking that, but I was unconsciously. I can see how I was like, I got myself in a prison and I can't get out. And they're never going to even look at me like this. And I'm stuck like this. And it was a frightening, horrible time. But yeah, that's why it's so against puberty versus because Jesus, it's a formative part of becoming an adult.
Yeah, even with gender dysphoria or not, you think, what are these kids going to be like when they're 40? We don't know what's going to happen to them,
They've never experienced a biological puberty and they've only experienced a synthetic chemical puberty. We all know the chemical doesn't, it's like, pot noodles versus a healthy stew, like a big difference. I don't know what is going to be missing, but there'll be natural nutrients missing from the sexual awakening and the sexual development experience.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is.
I completely agree. And I suppose in the conversation, it's always, should they be used, should they not? But then even in terms of people that now say they don't regret it, or young adults who didn't get the chance to go on them and say, oh, I've had to now go through male puberty, I have irreversible changes, I wish I'd had it. It's a wonder why the conversation isn't, you could go on these, but the risk to your body is higher to go on these than to live with gender dysphoria and for us to help you manage it. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't seem to be showing them like which is actually the least harm caused to you.
I'll put back on you a bit like that. As far as I can see, the clinics are saying that, and the kids, because they're kids, and the parents, because they're terrified, just say, yeah, that's fine.
I don't know, okay. Yeah,
the clinicians do all that. Just like if you were in awful pain with a tooth or something, and the dentist said, well, will you sign this because there's probably, yeah, go on, sign it, give it to me. Do you know what I mean? So they're in such a rush to get what they believe is the solution. They're not listening to a doctor saying, oh, well, there's, complications. And that's why informed consent is arguably such a mess, because when you're in pain and you believe A is the solution, you'll go through you'll walk over hot coals to get at it.
Yeah.
Believe it's the solution, which is one of the reasons why Genspect is so interested in the culture And we believe by the time it's in the doctor's office, it's the 11th hour. They've bought everything. It's too late. It's way too late.
Yeah.
And so moving for rationality at that point, I don't think makes sense. You've got to get it much earlier. You've got to get it in the schools and in the culture and in the media.
I actually have quite a similar experience to that in terms of I had some acne as a teenager, and I really struggled with my self-image, and I think a lot of it was intertwined with my sexuality and feeling very out of place and kind of undesirable to anyone. But my acne wasn't even very bad, but I just never wanted anyone to look at my face. I was extremely troubled by it, and it was so bad that I put a lot of pressure on my mum to help me get Roaccutane, that medication. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Hello.
And
did you take it?
I did take it. Yeah, I made it all the way. I was 14, and so on one hand, the medication worked perfectly. I lost all my acne. I've never had issues with acne since, and I didn't experience any noticeable mental health side effects or anything besides dryness, at least that I noticed at the time. But it's a stretch maybe. But I have an autoimmune disease now, which I developed when I was 21. And I've even read a few research papers linking it to possibly being on that drug. Now, I don't know if that, it's inconclusive, but I remember I was so determined, and my mum was terrified because of the sort of rare cases of, have you heard that there were some people that became suicidal on them or something? And I've
had clients. I've had clients who
really,
I take Roaccutane very, very seriously. I've just seen too many real life, very frightening examples.
Wow.
That I don't know, but I'm very wary, very wary. I just seen it myself with people, but I had terrible acne. It lasted years, and it went on and on and on. It was awful. It was part of obviously the self-loathing, and obviously didn't help anything. And then I went on the pill. I think it was 17, 18. I was on different pills, but then I found there was a pill, some sort of 1960s crazy pill that treated acne as well. And it was the most amazing experience. I remember going into the mirror and I was like, they're all just going. They're just going. It was a beautiful feeling of all of those spots for so many years. They were just part of my awful existence. And then they went. And then I used to change doctors because you were only meant to be on that pill for maybe 6 months. I was on it for 10 years. I used to change doctors so that I could get it to continue on, because I was not letting that out of my claw.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's ridiculous when I finally stopped taking, it's called Dianet. When I stopped taking, even now I remember, petrified it was going to come back. I didn't care about all the cancer and all this. I couldn't care less. It had cleared my skin. It cleared my skin,
It was very much my sentiment, and the warnings, I was very much in the mind of, well, that's not going to be me.
I can't even hear you. You're an invincible teenager. Get out of my way. Just give it to me. That's what the teenagers are like now. So you can see why I'm very, I presume, wary of informed consent as a result. They're not even interested. They don't have the maturity or the complexity to understand. And their brains literally aren't formed yet.
Mm-hmm.
They're still a construction site in their brain.
Yeah.
And the ability to weigh up risk is completely unbalanced at that age. When you're a teenager, you see all the benefits and you don't see the risks. And you won't see the risks. Literally, it's not formed until you're in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
It's not formed. So no wonder we didn't see it.
I've been a patient, for quite a few different things, but doctors, obviously they're great and integral to our society, but I've noticed just across the board that whatever specialty they have, they sort of like to diagnose you with that thing. And depending on what it is, of course, I had quite a long journey trying to figure out a chronic pain issue I have, and I got diagnosed with all sorts, whatever specialist I saw, they kind of diagnosed me with what they treat. And there seems to be a real kind of a tendency towards having a bit of an ego, I think, and say,
the God complex, and counsellors, I was giving them a seminar on what, gender issues. And one of them said something, and it really resonated in the room, which was, I'm really sad to hear you talk about the complexity of gender, because so many people come in to me, students, they were all college counsellors who gave, counselling in college and university. And said all these students come into us with anxiety and panic and depression, and we don't know what to do with them. But when somebody came in with gender, we finally had a solution, and it was very satisfying. And now you're telling us we don't. And I'm like, yeah, you don't. Nobody's a solution to life. If you're working in counselling or psychotherapy, it's not easy. It's not easily packageable. It's none of this is simple.
Yeah, you could argue it's a lot more complex than, general anxiety.
Yeah.
So on that note, I guess with Genspect, I'd love to hear, dig into what you guys do, where you're at the moment.
So Genspect is an organisation we set up to become a voice for parents. We quickly expanded to become just a healthy approach to sex and gender. The reason why we did that was because there was such a demand for people to speak out in a rational, evidence-informed way about what was going around the world. We're one of the few international organisations. Most organisations like Sex Matters, Transgender Trend, Do No Harm over in America, they're specific to their country. Well, we believe it's an international, it's definitely a global issue. And it's like whack-a-mole. It's sorted out in one country and it comes out in another country. So, I think an international approach is the most appropriate approach. It also suited me because I was in Little Ireland and nobody was interested in Ireland. So I had to go international to gather momentum. And now there's loads of momentum in Ireland. But when we formed, there was just very few people willing to put their name to anything. And maybe 3 or 4. It was ridiculous. We tried to get a letter into the Irish Times. At the end, 2 other people other than me, 3 people signed it. Like months of effort, you know what I mean? And that was something like 2021 or something. We are not a therapeutic organisation. Lots of people think we are because I'm a psychotherapist, so I presume we are. We're more a pressure group that we are advocating for people. We offer different services. We offer school advocacy services. We offer a service called Beyond Trans, where we offer funding for people who've been harmed by medical transition. We've got 220 detransitioners on our books.
Wow.
We also have the Dysphoria Support Network, and that's the organisation I formed in 2020, which is we offer about 5 online support groups for parents every week, 5 different ones. They're all online, and there's over 1,000 families on our books for that. So it's a big organisation. We have a lot of guidance. We offer a lot of guidance, just short guidance for schools, for clinicians, for professionals. And we have Stats for Gender, which is a kind of a website that offers research in a very kind of reliable, high quality research in an accessible way. And then we run conferences because we've gone head to head with WPATH, because as the years unfolded, it became clear that all roads led to WPATH.
Yeah.
And that they were the front, middle and centre. And we needed to attack their approach because their approach was fast-tracking everybody, not just children, but children, young people, vulnerable adults, onto an inappropriate fast-track onto medicalised approach to their gender. And you don't need to medicalise your gender. So we wrote the gender framework. We're in the middle of reviewing it at the moment. And it's going to be released in our conference in Lisbon in September. And the gender framework is offering a very comprehensive, it's 300 pages or more, document that's fully researched that shows how you can have a non-medicalised approach to gender distress. It doesn't have to be medicalised. And it's the first of its kind, and it divides up into, education, family, legal, society, prison, sports, the whole thing. Everything is in that, and why sex needs to be prioritised over gender identity. As well as that, our kind of head-to-head with WPATH is because they tried to bring in this awfully insidious #NoDebate.
Yeah.
We responded by saying wherever they have a conference, we're going to have a conference in the same town at the same time. And so they had a conference in Killarney in Ireland. We had a conference in Killarney in Ireland just down the road at the same time. They had a conference in Denver in the USA. We had a conference in Denver in the USA at the same time. They're having a conference in Lisbon, and so we're having a
I was wondering how you picked the locations, actually, because I was thinking, I wonder what's drawn them to Lisbon, but God, they obviously can't stand you guys chasing them around.
Yeah, they've said join us. They've tried to kind of woo us. We've had lots of Zoom calls with them. They've sent us legal letters. They've sent us, why are you hurting us letters. They're throwing everything at us. And we're just inexorably just following them. And just politely, we're not going into a fight with them, but in the same town, we're offering, and it's called The Bigger Picture, we're offering another alternative view on what they're. So we're just politely, but insistently and persistently and consistently saying, we have another view. There's another narrative on this. And you know what? Some WPATH clinicians have attended our conferences, and we're delighted that they have.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys do such great work. So in that future piece that you're bringing out, does that actually have recommended pathways for people experiencing gender dysphoria in that sense?
We do. So chapter 2 is psychology. So it's a framework, and it's not a health framework. It's a framework because we don't see the need to pathologize gender identity distress. And we were very pleased to see that Cass suggested future clinics won't need the word gender in its name. This is distress. There's lots of ways for somebody to be distressed. One person, I could have got distressed like other members of my family and become very OCD. I could have got distressed in other ways. I got distressed around my role as a girl.
Yeah.
And that is called gender. So you could arguably say sex is male and female, gender is masculinity and femininity.
Mm-hmm.
And I reject femininity. But why fixate on the fact that it's gender? It's a manifestation of distress. And we believe that it should be approached in a holistic way, just like Hilary Cass says in her review. Thankfully, we've landed in the same place. And our document shows, and we have a whole chapter on psychology, but we are quite strong in the watch out for the over-emphasis and over-reliance on therapists. Like, parents are the world authority on their children. Lots of these kids don't need therapy. They need to go out more. They need to be helped build friendships. They need to join some clubs. They need to get off the internet. And that sometimes going to a therapy almost gives an imprimatur on the gender distress, when actually they'd be better off being helped in a more personal way rather than pathologizing way.
Yeah. So is it not necessarily something you need to do a trial on in terms of having some sort of study of people that follow this route rather than, the medication?
You could. Of course, everything is these days trialed. I think there will be trials coming out from Hilary Cass because she recommends that they are part of clinical trials, puberty blockers. I don't think on any level that it's ethical to stop a child's sexual development. So I'm not really in favour of trials. I think we've existed for thousands upon thousands of years. And suddenly, out of nowhere, in the last 10 years, we have to medicate people and stop people's sexual development. We never were able to. Suddenly, medical technology has advanced, so we are able to. And suddenly, we need to. I don't believe we do need to. I think it's a case of, because it's there, we're being offered it. And it's quite frightening, because what else is going to come with medical technology? It's a very lucrative industry. So what else are they going to offer us? You know what I mean?
It drives the demand,
Yeah, totally. It's become consumer-led. This is a consumer-led industry. So I'm very negative towards any sort of clinical trials, because I think, well, just look to history. This is quite clearly a social contagion, and it's quite clearly that it needs lots of help. Yeah, of course these kids need help. Lots of kids need help. There's lots of ways to help kids. You don't have to stop their sexual development. There's lots of other medication, for example, if you choose to medicalize, that won't stop their sexual development. The one aspect that is very likely to actually bring them out of their gender dysphoria, the one thing that's likely, is sexual feelings to other people and a consciousness of there is another world beyond me.
Yeah.
So I'm not pro trials.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And I think the trans activists will always counter the argument, because you can say, how did we get so far in history without stopping kids going through puberty? And they'll say, oh, well, those kids probably committed suicide. They were...
I'm glad you brought that up. I'd like to say, well, where's the big drop in the suicide?
Yeah.
Because in the last years, children, many children around the world got puberty blockers. So where's the drop in the suicide? Because actually it's gone up. So that doesn't hold water for a second.
Oh, they'll say, well, that's because of transphobia. Because
I know, but people say more than their prayers.
I could probably you'd play the role of a trans activist in an argument at this stage, and it's so infuriating, I'm curious with your approach to speaking on these topics, gender. You seem, yourself and Sasha, and I guess even Helen Joyce, people I admire, tend to lead largely with compassion. I mean, I'd say especially yourself, but I see a lot. Twitter is obviously a polarized speck of the wider feelings from society. But gosh, I know that, so you do have some of trans women in particular behaving very badly, and I don't think we need to feel sorry for them. But you do have then many who aren't necessarily doing so, but just the vitriol and because I'm still bearing in mind these are people who are obviously going through a lot. Do you know what I mean? So I'm wondering like what your thoughts are on all that and what's going to actually move us forward.
Well, isn't that the $1 million question? What will move us forward? I think, Twitter is a bed of roses. There's a few thorns there, all right. It's a pretty, Twitter is a pretty disturbing place to hang out. So at this stage, I tend to just because it's incredibly useful to get your message out.
Yeah.
I tend to just, put out a few things in the morning, and I might do something in the evening, but leave myself to it then, just stay off it otherwise, because it's very compelling. But a lot of people invite you to, answer back and explain yourself, but you're getting deeper and deeper because they're looking for us. Don't bore me. Don't be giving me all those words. Just give me something quick. You know what I mean? And once you give loads of words, it's like, lots of words.
Yeah.
So you have to do it short. And it's like, well, I can't do it short because it's really complex. So I probably shouldn't be hanging out on Twitter as much as I do, because it's not a good place. And yet I keep on going back to it. It's so funny. I tried to pull away from it and I ended up in chess. And I got the war zone. The hell was I doing? What the hell? I need to go for therapy. Like, this is insane. By the way, chess isn't good for the mental health either, but I still love it too. So there's obviously something about the challenge that brings me back. But so going back to wherever Twitter, it's awful. And I think it would be great if compassion led us out of it. I'm from Ireland and you're from Ireland, and I'm older than you, but like in the north, when you see after like 4 decades of bombing and people losing their lives and people going on hunger strikes, children's losing their lives, everybody losing their lives, awful, awful, awful injuries, kneecapping and all that. Ultimately, what happened was a truth and reconciliation. So you can go to war with people. If you look at Africa, it's the very same thing. Dreadful, dreadful miscarriages of justice, dreadful things happened. And ultimately what happened was a truth and reconciliation process. So the likelihood is very high that ultimately truth and reconciliation is going to be the way forward. But it might be decades away. It might be many decades away. And the further polarized we get, the more likely it will be decades away. The further people entrench. Because it's almost like if you've been married, I'm married 20 years, and when me and Henry have huge fights, I'm fighty. He isn't, God bless him. And so when we have a huge fight, there's a vibe in a good, strong marriage that you think, well, we're going to make friends anyway, so we might as well just speed up this process and make friends, because we're going to make friends. So just bring it on.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit like that with the gender. We're two polarized positions, and we're going to inevitably have to have some reconciliation. Mm-hmm. So what can we speed this up a little bit? Because an awful lot of young children are being devastated in the meantime. And, 18-year-olds by the thousands are having mastectomies. Boys are having genital surgery and they're deeply autistic, and they're finding it very difficult post-surgery. There's some really awfully dreadful things occurring. And so we need to move into truth and reconciliation. But honestly, the more I look at things, Cass review notwithstanding, I think we've got some years ahead of us.
Yeah.
You do.
That makes sense. And when I look back on when I wouldn't say I was ever a social justice warrior completely for it, but I would have just kind of unequivocally supported trans rights, and in that sense.
What woke you up?
Sorry?
What woke you up to that there was something more going on? Because I support trans rights, but like that there was something really dark and difficult happening. What woke you up to it?
Yeah, so I still support their rights in that sense, and I have a lot of passion for them. Well, it's something I can speak on much more like in another conversation, but it was a combination of me sort of understanding how the community was miserable with all of this obsession with gender, and I felt like I had to get on board with it, or I wouldn't really be included with my friends anymore. Like, I got to that stage where the gay guys who are more interested in queer nights and gender bendy nights were excluding me. So I was kind of like, okay, I better.
Do they have many trans men boyfriends?
No. You see, the thing is that they're all with men.
I was being sarcastic, sorry.
No,
I just know
they're all with men.
Gay men that are so pro trans rights, and I'm like, and how many trans men boyfriends have you had, and how many vaginas have you enjoyed?
No. Yeah, and they're all with men, but you'd hear it from the horse's mouth that they, oh, I definitely date a trans man, and I'm probably more pansexual actually, and I'm like, don't buy it. But
do you ever see them with a trans man? I'm very
heard of it. I've not seen it. No, not heard of it.
There's a whole thing. I'm not just being flippant, but it's a very important point. There's a whole generation of girls who've become trans men.
Yeah.
They've, medicated to become trans men. So they present very male in their face and in their body and in their shoulders and in their, facial hair. They really do look very male and very buff and very, technically attractive in that way. And they have vaginas.
Mm-hmm.
And they are on testosterone, so their libido is sky high.
Yeah.
They want sex and they want a lot of it. And they agonize over how that they're gay males because they fancy men, perhaps because they're the testosterone impact, but they want to have sex with a penis. They want, penis sex. And what they're ending up is with each other. The two trans men, two gay men, an awful lot of the time because they're not getting anywhere with the biological males. And it's a pretense. All these trans men saying that they've got boyfriends and me and my boyfriend, and it's like you're two females pretending you're two males. And meanwhile, the gay males are very cynically saying, oh yeah, trans rights. And I'm like, yeah, how come none of you have had a trans man boyfriend? Not even one of you. And they really need to, that really needs to be highlighted because those girls are being absolutely led a merry dance as if all the guys saying, yeah, I would. I just not attracted to you personally, but I would, technically.
Oh, it seemed to be progressive, and it's the exact same with. So I'm in a monogamous relationship. I've always wanted that, and I'm very happy. It's been coming up on 5 years, but all the gay men I know in London are in open relationships, and I think the human experience is vast, and there must be some people who that would work for. But now it's seen as, oh, well, if I'm not in an open relationship, people are not going to think I'm progressive. And I felt actively judged by some people when they said, oh, are you not open? And it's like they pity you. They're like, oh God, you poor thing, only being able to have sex with one person. And I'll see them, some of them get into a relationship and they're open from day one. So they don't even give themselves time to explore each other. It's like they're back on Grindr, back on the app straight away. And but
they're losing the beauty of intimacy, of somebody being on your team, of falling in love. There's nothing like falling in love. There's nothing like just having me and my husband have a lovely relationship. There's nothing like the depth of a long relationship. Just nothing like it. Mm-hmm. Nothing. I don't know anything else to it.
Completely. And I think, a lot of gay men are so hurt from how they grew up. I think they have a lot of barriers up, I think for some of them I think a lot of them have never known what it's like to be in love, to be honest, from my observations.
I agree. Somebody who'd look down on somebody or have pity for somebody in a monogamous relationship, I would say you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah, and it's the queer scene in London is it's difficult, because even if you have a conventional job, people are like, oh, bleak, you need to be like a freelance, making jewelry 2 days a week and then having a music night but still being on universal credit at the same time while complaining that, the government isn't giving you enough money. But for example, it was my birthday last weekend and we did go to an LGBT night, and there's still lots of elements of it I enjoy, so I can kind of take the bits I like and then kind of see the rest for what it is. And it's called Adonis, right? So it was always gay men, like this night was for, but now nothing can be gay men or gay or lesbians. Everything needs to be queered. But what you have then is 90% of the attendees are still all gay men, hypersexual, like, you know,
Okay.
but, and then they have, someone said, should we go to the Finta room? And I was like, what's that? And they were like, oh, it's the femme, intersex, non-binary, asexual room. And they have a little spot for people who are not conventionally gay men. And I just thought, have you ever met someone who's intersex? You know, there's not a chance that they're there. We actually didn't, because there was a big queue, and I was like, I really just... And
a queue to get into the filter room.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, since I started my channel, when I'm in these spaces, I have a level of anxiety that I'm going to bump into someone and they're going to go, I've seen what you're doing. Like, why the hell are you here? Because I've had a few people, you know, not be, you know, they're not friends with me anymore because I think I'm transphobic and everything. So, but it's just hilarious. I'm like, I bet an intersex person has never set foot in that room, you know?
And are there a lot of trans men in that room?
I have no idea, but I looked at the queue and it was all very masculine looking men.
Next time in London, you go there and check out the room.
You get a lot of girls with mastectomies who I think are non-binary. And just on the point where you're saying, you know, lots of trans men who are attracted to men, what are your thoughts on autoandrophilia? Because it's something I come across, you know, if you look online, there are girls talking about fantasizing having a male body and being turned on by it, you know, so it seems to definitely be a thing. I don't know how common.
And the same, you know, I've met people with that experience with autoandrophilia, and they talk about it, and I've met people with autogynephilia, obviously, which is spoken about that much more. It certainly, some women are definitely experiencing it. There's no doubt about it, because I've met them.
Okay.
And they are being told that they're not experiencing it. And I think there's no research, there's no expert. It's one of those many, many experiences within the sex and gender world that is just anecdotal. We've only got anecdotal reports. And you become very nervous to talk about it, because there's a whole cohort of people, especially on Twitter, who just... they ascribe all sorts of really awful, motives to anybody who's just trying to speak about these issues, who's just trying to get to the truth as part of the truth and reconciliation process. Like, I've no agenda with that. I just want to find out how much it's going on, how much it's impacting. I do think the rise in the libido of the women who have mastectomies and who are suddenly highly charged sexually, they're a very different beast to women who don't have testosterone. I always think of, you know, in Jazz Jennings, there was an extraordinary clip. She went on a date with a trans man. She was a woman, born woman, transitioned to male. And that trans man chased Jazz Jennings around the ice rink like this sexually incontinent lunatic. And Jazz came out going, no, I don't think that guy's for me. And she kind of walked away. He's obviously been rabid. You could see it in his eyes, you know what I mean?
And it's funny with the trans women, it's the complete opposite, because the estrogen is killing their sex drive, you know?
I know, but they're taking Viagra.
Really?
Oh, okay. The men are doing a whole other thing. But the women are sexually charged, and an awful lot of the women's rights crowd don't know many trans men. They don't know many women who identify as trans. They don't know many detransitioned women. They don't know these people, so they don't really speak about them. They don't talk about them. They just dwell completely on one aspect of gender, which is trans women, i.e. men who have medically transitioned to women, and autogynephilia, and they focus completely on that, as if the women, 51% of the population, are bestowed with some sort of special goodness and kindness that men don't have, and therefore we get a kind of a free pass from bad behaviour, when anybody who knows the human knows that men and women are very different in many ways. We're very similar in other ways. And we all have abilities to be very, behave in a very dark way. I think it's interesting that statistically men are in the outer parameters of the extremities. So men are more likely to kill, men are more likely to be, way more likely to kill and be serial killers. Men will rape. So men will go to the extremes of bad behaviour, and they'll be on the outer perimeters. They'll also be the extremes of intelligence, the extremes of stupidity. While in that's the larger spectrum, but women are in the smaller. So they mightn't be as extreme, but there's more of them, if you follow me, behaving negatively in this point.
That's very interesting.
So, it is very interesting when you look at the research, and it kind of makes a lot of intuitive sense that there's a lot of extremely awful behaviour by a small number of men. I remember one woman saying to me early in this debate, I said, you've got a problem with men. And she goes, I won't have a problem with men when men stop raping and murdering women. And I was like, well, it's kind of unanswerable. Like, men do rape and murder women.
The exact same thing with talking about autogynephilia, trying to understand the truth from a neutral perspective, and obviously thinking about the suffering that goes on from a compassionate lens while not condoning any bad behavior. You know, I was in a debate with some feminists on TikTok, and I tried to explain my point of view. They did not like me. You know, they just conflated everything I was saying with, oh my God, you want us to feel sorry for predators. And I said, no, absolutely not. I'm just saying, is it advantageous for us to try and, silence this as an issue and try and put it back in the closet? Because that seems to be, for me, like something that's actually got us to this point. So I've seen you speak on this before about raising awareness and how that's actually needed. So could you explain a bit more on what your motives behind that would be?
Well, we have thought long and hard about this in Genspect, and we have, regular meetings where we kind of consider different issues. With autogynephilia, we've thought about it long and hard in Genspect, and we believe it's very important that we raise public awareness to this condition. It's a paraphilia. It's a disorder that some men have. It's a small number of men, but they do wreak havoc. And it's a paraphilia where it's erotic fixation on the idea of themselves being a woman. And as a result, they seek access to women's spaces. They seek to be perceived as a woman in lots of different ways. And because it's erotically driven, you're effectively taking part in a sex act when you're in the company of an autogynephile who is seeking acceptance as a woman. So you're kind of inadvertently taking part in a sex act. I remember when I had a shop in Dublin in the 90s, and this man used to visit. I didn't know what autogynephilia was.
Yeah.
No idea, but the man used to visit my shop and regularly, and he would try on dresses, and he would come out of the dressing room. I was on my own in the shop. I was the only person in the shop. He'd come out of the dressing room, and he'd have a dress on, and he'd have a boner, have an erection. And I would kind of look away, and he'd say, is this nice on me? And I'd go, yeah. I was in my 20s, early 20s. And then he'd go back in, try on another dress. What do you think of this? Is this colour? And then he sometimes would buy things. And, it was a small shop. I was trying to make a business. It was a business, but it wasn't. I wasn't rich. And he'd come back again, and he'd come back again. And I hated seeing him walk in the shop. And it was always when I was alone. And then one day, it's disgusting. It was awful. It was awful. The whole thing was awful. And I didn't know what to do because I was just kind of, I thought he wanted to try on. I had no idea of what paraphilia was.
Yeah.
If I had known, just like the other paraphilias, which I know about, I would have known what was going on. I would have said, get out of the shop, please. But I didn't know what was going on. And that's what happens when you don't know what a paraphilia, autogynephilia is. And so then my friend was visiting, and she was having a coffee with me, and he came in. So he obviously thought two young women in their 20s. And he did the same. And her face looked like she was going to vomit when he came out. And I realised in a second from her face that what was going down, that I was being basically forced into a sex act, and I didn't know I was. And from then on, I completely changed my attitude to the guy. Basically, cold shouldered him. You know what I mean? You're not welcome. No, we don't have it in your size. No, I don't think so. And just kind of a complete change of attitude. And he stopped coming in. Now, that's a very interesting story. Do you follow me? That you need to know what a paraphilia is if you're a woman, if you're going to equip yourself against it. And so we've thought about it long, hard, and we think autogynephilia needs to be a well-known term, just like the other paraphilias in the DSM, in the diagnostic field. Even though I'm not pro-diagnosis, some diagnoses need to be gotten. This is one of them. Paraphilias are very dangerous. Not all of them, and it depends on the people. So I've been accused of, let's say, comparing autogynephilia with paedophilia, and I'm like, that's not quite correct. I'm saying paraphilias are paraphilias. There's a few of them that are more common than others. Frotteurism, which is men rubbing up against women on trains and places like that. If you know that's a paraphilia, you say, get the hell away from me. Stop rubbing it, because you're kind of thinking when it happens, and it's happened to most women, you're thinking, did he just move against me? Did he? Sorry, it's a very busy train. I'm not sure really what's going down. It takes a while before you realise, get the hell away from me, you creep. And the same with, let's say, a flasher. I remember when I was a kid, I used to go through woods to get to school. And this flasher was always an exhibitionist who had a paraphilia, I now know. He was young, he was in his teenage years. And he used to flash me as I was going to school. And I used to be like a little kid just praying that he wouldn't be there, that he wouldn't be there. I now know, because he did it hundreds of times to me, I now know he was waiting for me. I didn't realise that. I thought I was just coming across this flasher. Little kid that I was in primary school. I was under 12.
Did you tell your parents?
No, I had a very troubled background, so that was never going to happen.
Right.
And yeah, so that guy was waiting for me in that spot. And he knew well I'd be on my own walking to school, in and around from 10 to 9 till 9. I'd be walking by that space. And I was there like an innocent dope, hoping I wouldn't come across him, not realising he's waiting for you, Stella. So that lack of knowledge doesn't equip us to defend ourselves. And so we strongly believe in Genspect that we need a public awareness campaign around autogynephilia, because you will be inadvertently taking part in sex acts, if not, and it can get really, really destructive. Some autogynephiles are narcissistic. Some autogynephiles seem to be narcissistic monsters. Some autogynephiles seem to be decent people from what I've met. Do you know what I mean? So it seems to have a range. It reminds me of with alcoholism. Some alcoholics are violent and they're liars and they're really bad people. Some alcoholics are quietly drinking themselves to death and they're beautiful people. And, the full range happens. They're not all violent monsters.
Yeah.
And so people think that all autogynephiles are violent monsters. And also people who presume that it escalates. We've no research that it escalates. It definitely escalates for some people. We also don't know how much the internet is impacting. I think it's impacting a massive amount. I think there's a huge more number of autogynephiles than there ever was before, but we don't know. So we need to speak about it freely. And I think that there's a concerted campaign on two sides of the debate. One is trans activists, the other are women's rights campaigners, and they're actively trying to shut down and smear and lie about people like me who are trying to speak about it in an honest way. And I'm just seeking public awareness, and I'm just seeking a step on the road of truth and reconciliation so we can get to a better place. And I think the idea that educating the public with some public awareness of autogynephilia is somehow normalising the condition is frankly a really ignorant view of what we're doing. It's somebody who hasn't thought very deeply about what we're at, and it's somebody who needs to kind of bring a bit more complexity into the issue. It's very simple for people to say, I don't care. I don't care about it. Well, don't care. Well, go and work somewhere else. Go and talk about something else if you don't care. If you care, you need to perhaps engage in actually what's going on, rather than pretending that there's only autogynephiles who are only monsters who need to be, I don't know, locked up in their bedrooms. I don't know where people are going with their idea with this. They're saying, I don't want to talk about it. It's like, fine, don't. Stop shutting down people who do want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We want society safer. We want to come to a better place around it.
Mm. I know all too well the kind you're speaking of, and I've been accused on Twitter for profiling, a conversation around basically the same thing as pedophiles. But back when I wasn't involved in this at all, I just happened to stumble across a video of Posey Parker and saw her speaking on, and I was immediately, as a gay man who believed in some of this stuff, I was just like, oh God, this is vile, and switched it straight off, But then when I heard, the Wish trials of J.K. Rowling and other things that were, definitely not apologizing for their views and being very honest about their views, but coming from it slightly more neutrally and fact-based and, not like hate-driven, that made me listen, and that's my experience. But I feel like that's more of a way forward, if you know what I mean. And,
Okay. Well, I think Kelly J. Keane has done some great work in empowering women to say that's a man.
Yeah.
And empowering women to say I'm a woman. And an adult human female is such a brilliant campaign. I just love it. I really do. I think it's a great idea. However, I think kind of this outrage what would you call it? Outrage, incentivizing people to be outraged all the time. And, you know what I mean, consistently just focusing on one aspect of the gender issue, which is men who are autogynephiles and who are also monsters, is missing the tragedies of the families that have been ripped apart. The autistic girls with mastectomies at 18 who regret it at 19. The boys who have incontinence after genital surgery at, 20. The hysterectomies. The devastating consequences that I see probably more of. Like I said earlier, we have 220 detransitioners on the books and Beyond Trans. I run a therapeutic support group for Beyond Transitioners. These are people who've been hurt by medical transition. I have a lot of empathy. And, some of these are autogynephiles as well. And so we have to have compassion for people who have these conditions for whatever reasons. We don't know why they have these conditions. Nobody's figured it out. Why is one person alcoholic and one person isn't? We don't know. Nobody's figured out this. Lots of people have lots of theories. And so while I thought there was some brilliant elements to that campaign, I loved the T-shirts. I loved the poster campaign and the billboard campaign. So powerful. I think it feels like it's disintegrating these days. But maybe it'll rise again into a more productive manner. And, I've no fight with her. I think, she could continue to, she's a very compelling speaker. She could continue to do great work. But I do take issue with other people who are trolls, who are misrepresenting me and lying about me. And certainly whenever she does, I take issue with her misrepresenting me, lying about me, pretending that I'm saying, yes, some autogynephiles or some trans women should be in single-sex spaces. Genspect has created an entire framework explaining why sex needs to be prioritized over gender. We shouldn't let men into single-sex spaces. We've got all of that information on our website. So we don't do what she often says that we do. So it seems very unfortunate that she hasn't kind of informed herself on the work we do and presumed we're doing A when we're doing B. And therefore, lots of other women are now been led down the garden path thinking A when really B is actually what's the work is going on. Yeah, I know some people are really put off by the way she speaks, but some people aren't. I think there's lots of ways. If you look at any movement, like I say, the Northern Ireland or South Africa, or, look at any political movement, there's been so many in the world. And we're a counter-revolution, you know what I mean? So you need all the different aspects to bring about a counter-revolution. And I welcome everybody's voice that can be productive and truthful. But if you can't be productive or truthful, I'm just not really interested in kind of working alongside those people.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you, so with autogynephilia, I feel like it's often oversimplified in terms of how we see it play out. And I think in the example you gave, it's very clear cut, like that was a sex act, right? Ray Blanchard has coined the actual term and explained his theory behind it. So sometimes I feel like people take the theory and they take the bits they like to support their argument and they discard the rest. So he's explained and this is just a theory, you know, I have no idea, but he's explained that when someone goes on to fully transition and have a female identity and, you know, want to move through the world, you know, quote unquote, as a woman, that it's often moved beyond a fetishistic side, because it's like he described that the constant return to this vision of themselves as a woman sort of forms this female identity, thus forming gender dysphoria. And eventually it kind of moves sort of beyond the erotic component, where they may still have elements there. But I don't know if that's true or not, but I think one thing I noticed from the gender critical side is a poor understanding of male sexuality, you know, because men tend to be always need novelty, if you know what I mean. And
Yes.
Typically they're...
Testosterone is driven by novelty. And so the porn industry really capitalizes on that and constantly gives the new and the illicit, because that's how you get more users, you know, because otherwise old users would, regular users would lose interest. So they constantly give something new, and it's getting more and more transgressive because that appeals to testosterone.
Yeah. So would you say, like, for that reason, I think to say someone who's fully transitioned, has been living that way for a couple of years, to say that they're always coercing someone into a sex act by being in their clothing and stuff, do you think that's an oversimplification?
I do, but I think we don't know the actual details, because some of these autogynephiles are very narcissistic and have other, maybe sadism. They have other aspects to their disposition that is making them behave in ways that are really, really inappropriate. So you can't say once they've transitioned they're pussycats. They're not. You know what I mean? Some of them, but some of them, we should have used a different word there, but anyway, some of them are very, very disturbed, and some of them aren't. Some of them, after they medically transition, you know, Debbie Hayton described that the beast of testosterone basically reduced a huge amount of his sexual impulse. But a lot of women are saying that's just a pretense. That's just a pretense. That's not true. And I'm like, I don't know if it's true or not. I've seen the full spectrum. Some of them are definitely maintaining really profoundly inappropriate behavior. Some of them aren't.
Yeah.
And some of them are medicalizing, and that is, they've got a full level of testosterone within them. What we need to do is be able to research and speak about this freely. And I know Aaron Tyrrell speaks about it freely and gets an awful lot. He's a trans man, and he gets an awful lot of grief because of what he says. And all he's trying to do is lift the lid on this condition. And it feels Victorian, the way people are being shut down on the basis of, I don't want to hear about it. I'm like, don't listen to us then.
Yeah.
Listen to it. Some people are trying to figure out this really complicated condition that has actually taken a huge hold of the world, because arguably it's trans women, which is males who have medically transitioned to present as female. They are arguably the linchpin of the entire gender movement. The entire trans movement is extremely rich trans women. So if you're not interested in learning about the drives and nature of autogynephilia, more fool you, because we would really benefit from understanding what these billionaires are driven by, so that we could figure out what's actually gone on, especially in the last 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why this theory of it being almost an orientation in which, you know, they're becoming in love with themselves as a woman, and they'll fight that identity. Some of them will want to fight that identity to the death. So if anyone challenges the identity, and if they're not allowed to play on a women's sports team, that's challenging the identity. And it kind of like makes me imagine a man whose family or spouse is under threat of being killed, you know, like he'll do anything to stop that from happening. And I'm not trying to paint it as something pure and lovely in that sense, but it just seems like there's so much more to it. And they also refute the fact that some boys report feeling in childhood the desire to be female.
Yeah, there's been lots of reports of young boys who are wearing the mother's tops, and you know what I mean. There's been too many reports, too much research. There's a limited level of research that suggests definitely that some boys do report it from childhood. There's also seems to be genetic aspect insofar as fathers and sons, but maybe it's not genetic, maybe it's socialized, maybe it's conditioning. Again and again and again, we don't know. We haven't a notion. We need to speak about it. We need to listen to all the anecdotal reports and start to build a body of evidence so they'll get some sort of understanding with autogynephilia. I do think when you look at the likes of, let's say, for example, Phil Lilly, the man in the blue dress at the Denver conference, the Genspect conference in Denver, Phil Lilly is a man. He identifies as a man. He goes by he, him pronouns. He uses the male toilets, and he has not medicalized, and he chooses to wear a dress. And arguably anybody who identifies as a man, uses he, him pronouns, and uses the male toilets is already one step removed from true autogynephilia. Because true autogynephilia would be certainly presenting as a woman and using she, her, and trying to get to the girls' toilets. They would be presenting in a different manner. And so you could argue there's different levels of autogynephilia, and some people are moving towards recovery, and some people are moving away from recovery and entrenching deeper in. And, you know, Villali was very respectful to everybody at the conference. He behaved impeccably. And, you know, he wore a blue dress. And as somebody who was so gender nonconforming as a kid, and as somebody who's so aware of the absolute prison some men find themselves, that they can't wear satin and they can't wear makeup, and they want to wear long nails, and they want to just play with their kind of presentation, to be told that they can't, I think is very, narrow-minded. I also think that there's an awful lot of women who are also gender non-conforming, and they want to sit in a certain way, they want to speak in a certain way, they want to wear clothes. I think, honestly, I wear basically what could be considered male clothes all the time. So I think we've kind of been freed. Women have been free to wear whatever the hell they want. But I see people like on Twitter, and even yesterday, and they were retweeting this guy who said, wear whatever you want, dress however you want, just like J.K. Rowling said. But wear whatever you want, dress however you want, but just don't gain access to same-sex spaces. And I'm like, but that's Phil Lilly. And you absolutely eviscerated Genspect, and you almost brought us down. You devastated our team, and you created an awful lot of untruths and lies and misrepresentations of our work, that we were somehow endorsing every word that a guy called Phil Lilly said just because we took a photo of him at our conference. And what we were doing was basically a celebration of nonconformity. It was very interesting that Phil Lilly was wearing a dress without any breast forms because he hasn't medicalized, and he was standing beside a detransitioner called Laura Becker, who is completely flamboyant and is absolutely fabulous in her absolute nonconformity rather than gender nonconformity, just nonconforming. And in the background, you know, there was a trans man, but a trans woman, but there's some people who are trans women and they still have large breasts, maybe not wearing a bra, wearing a tight dress, but they're not noticed because they're calling themselves a detransitioner, while Phil Lilly, who has the honesty to call himself an autogynephile, is treated like absolute dirt when somebody else is arguably wearing full woman face, makeup, has medicalized, has breasts, but they get a free pass because they're a detransitioner. You know, none of this makes sense. It's completely illogical. And I'm not saying that we have figured out a way forward. I'm saying we need to question everything at the moment because we don't have research to inform ourselves. And I think the extraordinary pile-on that happened, it defied what was it that J.K. Rowling, I think it was 280,000 likes for dress however you please, wear whatever you want. You remember that famous tweet in 2021, I think it was? It was a phenomenal level of likes. And I'm like, I'm now being told a few years later, oh, that was just metaphorical. I only liked that because I only went on and on and on about how brilliant that tweet was because I saw it as a metaphorical way of presenting. I didn't actually agree with wear whatever you want, dress however you please. And I'm like, I actually did. Wear whatever you want, dress however you please. However, no, erections in a shop and showing it to the shop girl isn't appropriate, like I had. Do you follow me? But we didn't get that with Phil Lilly.
Yeah, there's a difference, for sure.
There's a difference. He behaved very well. If he hadn't behaved very well, we would have spoken to him. But he behaved impeccably. And I don't know the guy, but I do know. So I'm not going to kind of say yes or no about the person. You know what I mean? But I do know he's written a book. And anybody who's gone to the trouble of writing a 600-page book is thinking very deeply about it. Anybody who is choosing to say that they're autogynephile and give their own name to it, which is auto-heterosexual, and also wear a dress, and also identify as male, and also go to the men's toilets. This is somebody who is really trying to explore something in a very honest manner. I don't know if he's an honest man, but I certainly say that's an honest approach. That's as far as I know the guy. And it's part of this guilt by association that actually brought in all the trouble. This idea that somebody who attended your conference, I don't like a few lines in their book, and I didn't like, he gave some sort of endorsement to child medicalization, which was the reason why we moved the book out of our website, even though I thought it was very unfortunate because there was so much else in the book that certainly I didn't agree with, but provoked me to think. And that's a good idea when you have very little research. We should be in a thought-provoking place. But because of that, we can't endorse anything that recommends child medicalization because I think it's a terrible thing to do to a child.
I'd be curious actually what that says, because he said to me when I interviewed him that he doesn't necessarily agree with child transition, and it was taken out of context. Now,
it was. I'll give my best representation of it. We were uneasy about it, but he was making a more complicated point, and you're right to take me up on it. He was saying something along the lines of, well, if you're going to give puberty blockers, you might as well get cross-sex hormones. What's the point?
Right.
You know what I mean? And he's right. There is a point in that, because puberty blockers are not a light intervention. And why you messing around. So there is good for you for taking me up on that. It was the reason why we removed it, but also the reason why, and I'd be dishonest not to say it wasn't, was we were absolutely devastated. It felt like it was going to bring down Genspect. It was an incredibly frightening time. We'd done so much good work. We had so much massively success stories. Hundreds and hundreds of people have put their schools right because of our guidance. We're going into kind of clinics and schools all over the world. We've kind of helped so many families with the GDSN every single week with 5 online meetings, 1,000 families, all these detransitioners who've been helped with, therapeutic groups and therapy. And it was all going to crumble because, frankly, it was a huge cohort of women, mostly in Britain, who hadn't attended the conference, that were disgusted by the presence of a man in a dress. And it was an extraordinary onslaught onto Genspect that I don't think we've recovered from. And I know, one of the members of the team, sadly, the woman who posted the picture isn't part of our social media team. And you would say, yeah, there were fallen soldiers as a result of this. This really, really impacted us. It was very devastating. And it was because they didn't actually believe in J.K. Rowling's Wear Whatever You Please. They didn't actually believe in any of that. And I still haven't got a coherent position, which I continuously go back to. What do you think we should have done? Well, what actually should we have done? Because had we stopped him, we never even dreamed of stopping him coming in, but had we stopped him and said, you can't come in because you're wearing a dress, he would have sued us and he would have won, and he would have rightfully won. So what was their position? And, when I brought it up to people, nobody has given me an answer to that. Oh, you shouldn't have endorsed him. How did we endorse him? Well, his book is on the website. Right, loads of books are on our website. Like, Christ almighty, it was purity politics in the extreme. But I'm very well aware that I will get an awful lot of abuse for this. And I'm very well aware that, Genspect isn't a women's rights organisation. Genspect isn't an organisation that is trying to present only the women's viewpoint. What we're trying to do is rationally speak in a healthy way about sex and gender. What we're trying to do is stop the fast track for medicalization. And what we're trying to do is prioritise sex over gender. We've got a complex position, and we think that's the only position you can take in this really difficult waters.
Yeah. I think I love everything about your stance, and I think it properly reflects the complexity of it all, And I mean, from my view, I think just as an outfit, whether you're a male or a female, it was kind of an odd thing to wear to a conference. So that's what I would say on it, you know.
Oh, yeah. You know, he's flamboyant. He's a circus skills trainer. And I've no doubt a massive attention seeker. They exist in life. Well, what are going to do about those things?
See, that's what I'd possibly... So having spoken to him, and I kind of spoke to him about this at length, you know, I don't think I'm easily fooled necessarily, but he comes across to me as someone who does, as you say, think very deeply about this, want to raise awareness so that possibly lots of boys don't actually end up, because what's happening is they're being indoctrinated on Reddit and through the sissy porn, and because no one's out there saying, if you're autogynephilic, don't worry, like we can help you. Do you know what I mean? So he's trying. And I think for whatever the way his works, he said, I've been wearing this dress for years. I just feel very comfortable in it. And I said, you know, was there any part of you that was thinking, oh, everyone's, you know, I'm going to be looking at me, I love the attention? And he was just like, absolutely 100% no, you know?
Really?
So that's
100% no.
Yeah. You can.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, he did know, but it's like he's so used to looking for attention that he's not even thinking about it. It's so reflective for him. But I don't think that matters. Some people are very attention seeking. Come on, like you know what I mean? That's no crime. It's attention seeking. Whatever. I don't know. I don't know that, but I would say yeah. But I would say it's reflexive, and he's not thinking about it. But I do want to say that it's an important aspect of life is some people like to wear certain clothes, and some autogynephiles are autogynephilic and they wear jeans and t-shirts. So there will be autogynephiles at all these events, and they'll be wearing jeans and t-shirts, and they'll be getting off on the fact that they're wearing a jeans and t-shirt and they're an ordinary cool woman, you know, and they're not wearing a blue dress. They're actually in the middle of a sex act, but they're wearing a jeans and t-shirt or jeans and a jumper, because that's actually the woman that they're presenting. And so this rubbish that it's only people in flamboyant dresses that are actually getting off on it, but if he was wearing a jeans and t-shirt, that would be perfectly fine. It's incoherent. This is anybody who puts forward that argument hasn't thought about it deeply enough, because there's lots of ways to present as a woman. And the second point I'd like to make, I've noticed, and I think it's an important point, that it doesn't get raised very much. When a man is in a sex act, as I told you, my experience in the shop and the autogynephile used to come in, and the flasher, many flashes I've seen, but that particular flasher is kind of imprinted on my brain, the one when I was going to school. When a man is in a sex act, I know this because I know men, I can't think of it with a woman, you can see it in their face. There's a kind of a face, if you follow me. Bill did not have that face at that conference. You know, the face of somebody in a sex act, it's quite tangible.
I mean, you'll see a lot of those faces in the gay male world, I'll tell you. So
yeah, I remember in my 20s, you see a bloke who go, I like your top, and you go, get away from me, because they're just kind of creaming all over you, and you're just like, ah. Do you know what I mean? You can see it. It's a very tangible face, and you know it, and that's why I'm like, we can't legislate for this. The fact is, you know, the person beside you on the train might be engaging in a sex act because he's looking at your feet. He's a foot fetishist. You've got open sandals on, and he's looking at it, and you can see what he's looking at. And what are we going to do if they behave, you know, civilly? There is nothing we can do about their secret sex thoughts. I could be having secret sex thoughts now. You're going to live in Iran if you're going to try and legislate for people with their secret sex thought.
Yeah. And I'm just very skeptical of the simplification of it, because, you know, even if you're a straight man with a woman, like, you know, the first couple of months of going out, you might feel very aroused when you see her, even when you're holding hands with her in public. Like, you know, any man who's kissing a girl, for all you know, he could be getting slightly erect or fully.
Totally. I remember you work with teenage boys and you can see their face and you go, let's move the conversation on. You can see it. It's tangible. I can anyway.
Yeah. But those things, like, it moves, when it moves sort of beyond honeymoon phase to more companionship, you know, it just doesn't have the same hit. So I think possibly you see that playing out in if some of them have an outfit that they love to wear, they've been wearing it for a long time. I'm not convinced, you know, that it gives them that kick constantly, you know, all, you know.
Yeah. The big accusation that was Phil was platforming his fetish, and he did not behave as a person who was platforming his fetish. And I'm not convinced that I could say that about everybody at the conference, and I'm not convinced we can do anything about the fact that some people might platform a fetish, and it mightn't be autogynephilia that they're platforming.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have sex thoughts. When you're looking at them, when you're talking to them, when you're in a conference, when you're in a nightclub, it happens.
You were saying, like, you know, we don't know if it's genetic, we don't know if porn causes it or stuff like that. I guess
we don't know anything, so I'm not saying I don't have any theory. I'm open to all of them.
And from everything I've read, you know, if there's some sort, it seems like a lot of men have the capacity, more than we think, to become aroused at the thought of themselves by female, whether it's a certain percentage. And then through various experiences in life, it may unlock it more. So, like, obviously that porn can be addictive and really kind of seems to change the psyche. In the past, they never had access to something like that.
So before, as a counsellor, as a psychotherapist, I had a client with autogynephilia before I knew what autogynephilia was, and he was a teenager, and he was unlocked. He was unlocked by a very inappropriate educational centre that was they had a thing called Trans Tuesday, and all the boys were dressing up, and it unlocked something in him, and then he discovered trans porn, and I walked with him on that journey, and that was before I knew what autogynephilia was. You know what I mean? And this wasn't before the...
And could you see the real... Because even just looking on Reddit, for example, I've seen accounts of some men who are self-aware, AGP, they have a wife and kids, they seem miserable, and they say, I would never transition because I don't want to ruin their lives, and, you know, am I going to have to just be, you know, they seem truly dysphoric, at least in some way or other. So, and they don't seem to have nefarious intentions. Like, whether it turns into that or not, I don't know, but there seems to be real suffering behind this, you know? I'm just wondering if you agree with that, or...
Oh, if you think there's no suffering behind it, you need to educate yourself. You just need to go on the boards, look up the autogynephilia, look what they're speaking about. So there's some absolute narcissists there, there's predators there, and there's devastated people who are really, you know, deep thinkers and who are really not in a good place. You know what I mean? So we have to be aware there's the full range of humanity with autogynephilia, just like with everything else. And to simplify it, it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. It just seems like the decline of masculinity and the fear men have of being masculine, but also it's how some, you know, this incel culture of really struggling to fill that role. Yes. And, you know, I saw your interview with Sasha Bailey. Is that her name?
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. But it seems like that's a driving factor, you know, escaping the pressure. And I wanted to just show you one more clip. Don't worry, it's not it's not sissy hypno porn. It shows you the kind of stuff that they're being shown on TikTok, which I think is really quite damaging for them.
Men only approach you to sleep with you.
As a white, straight, cis man, it's very easy to be those things. What isn't as easy is facing the fact that that's wrong and to try and do the work to unlearn that stuff, to actively be anti-racist and anti-homophobic and anti-misogynistic. That work and unlearning those things goes on forever.
This is really interesting coming from a straight white man.
Well, okay, yes.
Like, everything's always been good for you. I'm a minority.
Yeah.
Nothing's good for me.
I'm Palestinian. I'm Arab.
You're Arab?
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, were you fasting?
My son just fell in the store and hurt himself and he began to cry. He said it hurt really bad. And then out of nowhere, a man appeared to give his unsolicited advice. At first, I was terrified because nobody asked for it.
But these men also inherently believe that, like, fat women or plus-size women are just disgusting.
It is men who decided that men will fight in wars, and that it is toxic masculinity, patriarchy, other men that drive men to self-harm. We derive privilege and power from this relationship to violence.
Straight man cancer. There is this gay man who is obsessed with the fantasy of male power, throwing around this talk about dominance and submission in a toxic and cancerous way.
Do you have any advice for straight men?
Relax.
Maybe they should journal.
Can they read?
Straight, white, cisgendered men, they only deconstruct because they choose to, not because they've been forced to.
What do you mean you can code, but you can't put up a shelf?
Stop. Literally running for office. Let's go! Everything. Like, enough, please. Get laid more. Straight men got laid more, there'd be a lot less problems in the world.
And one thing I'll just add on that is, in the gay community, you know, it's funny because gay men inherently want masculine men, but there's a culture of just, I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, oh, he was just so mask. You know, it's really looked down on if you're a masculine gay man who's not interested in, you know, gender bending, at least in big cities like London. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've got a guy on our team, Vincent, who works in our team, and he speaks a lot about, you know, masculinity and toxic masculinity and things like that, and it's very, very interesting. I think it's got very difficult to speak about men's issues in a free environment because we're being told everything is patriarchal. I think it's intersectional. I think it's really problematized along the intersectional narrative, and I don't think we benefit from that. To be human is to face a lot of difficulties. Some people face more difficulties than others. Some cis, white, straight males face way more difficulties than you know, somebody from a minority religion and a minority ethnicity and is queer and has one arm. It depends on the life you've had. There's lots of different lives, and the idea that, you know, the systemic nature of your identity is your only obstacle and your only fight in life means, wow, you don't know how difficult life can be, because life can be difficult for everybody. It depends on the person. Some people get really easy cards. Some people get really difficult cards. I just think it's such a simplistic way of looking at humanity.
And it's so like, I know men have the problem like anyone, but it does really break my heart to think of young boys believing this and believing that any desire to be masculine and to nurture their masculinity is creepy and toxic.
Yeah, I think it does break my heart. I think masculinity has to find its way. And, you know, we talk about sex and gender in Genspect, and, you know, we definitely want to help everybody. You know what I mean? We're not just for women, not just for men, not just for boys, not just for girls. It's humanity that needs to learn their way around it. And it does feel like masculinity has lost its way. You know, they were king of the world. Now it's almost like a dying empire. And it's got really strange position to be in, to be a cis white straight male. You're in a strange role, and it's very shame based, and I don't think it's very healthy right now.
Yeah, agreed. Well, look, Stella, I managed to actually dig into some of the topics I was dying to ask you on, so I really appreciate that. There's far more, so maybe we can talk again sometime. But this has been just such an interesting and stimulating conversation, and again, I really appreciate you giving me your time. So I guess what's next for you? Where can people find you? And yeah.
Well, I'm easily found, Stella O'Malley, but I'm easily found on all across the platforms. And to check out Genspect if you can. And I'd be delighted if people did come to our conference in Lisbon. I think it's going to be huge. Great fun. Oh, great. I'd like to meet you there. I think it's going to be fun, and it's going to be very informative. We've Lionel Shriver, Peter Boghossian, we have Michael Schellenberger, Hughes, we've got Julie Bindel, you know, Kathleen Stock, Helen Joyce, so many people, you know, Andrew Doyle, Andrew Gold as well. There's so many brilliant speakers. It's going to be a really, really interesting few days.
Yeah. I wouldn't have known those names maybe a year ago, but I knew every single one, so.
They're all superstars.
There's a
believe of our generation, if you ask me.
Great. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day.